Let me tell you about the meeting. My son, Philip, called it, said he'd been thinking, said he and Renee and Douglas had been talking. Just talking, Mama, just concerned. And they thought it might be time to sit down as a family and think about the future. My future. I said that sounded fine. I put on my good dress, the navy one Gerald picked out for my 65th birthday, 14 years ago. I wore my good earrings, I did my hair. I drove myself to the meeting. That part seemed to surprise them. We sat at my dining room table, the table I bought in 1987 with the commission from my third property sale, and Philip presented what he called a plan. Folders, charts. He had consulted someone, he said, an estate specialist. He talked for 40 minutes. I listened to every word. When he finished, I folded my hands on the table. I smiled. I said, "That's a lot to think about. Let me sit with it." And then I drove myself home. Now, before I tell you what was actually happening in that room, I need to know who's here with me today. Drop your city in the comments. Whether you're in South Carolina or Georgia or California or anywhere the Lord has placed you, tell me where you're watching from. Because somebody needed to find this story today, and I'm glad you did. I'm Loretta Beaumont, 79 years old, Charleston, South Carolina. I bought my first rental property in this city when I was 34 years old, a two-bedroom house on the east side that everyone told me was too much risk for a school teacher with two young children and a husband working double shifts at the port. I now own 11 properties, a commercial building on King Street, and an investment portfolio that my son Philip, who has a master's degree in business administration, has never once been invited to review. He thought the meeting was about my future. It was about his. What Philip did not know, what none of them knew sitting at that table while I smiled and folded my hands, was that 18 months earlier, I had sat in attorney Cecile Fontaine's office on Broad Street, and I had already moved everything. Every last detail. The harvest was not coming. The harvest was already complete. I need to take you back to 1979. Gerald was working nights at the port. I was teaching 4th grade at Memminger Elementary. We had Philip, 7 years old, already convinced he was smarter than everyone in the room, and Renee, 4, who even then watched everything with those quiet, calculating eyes I should have paid more attention to. We weren't poor, but we weren't comfortable either. We were the kind of family where every decision got made twice, once in hope and once in arithmetic. I had been reading. That's where it started. Reading everything I could find about real estate investment. Library books, photocopied articles from the business school at the College of Charleston that a friend of mine slipped me when she worked in their administration office. I found a 2-bedroom house on Sumter Street. The owner was an elderly white man named Mr. Calhoun, who wanted to sell quickly and quietly. His asking price was $14,000. I had saved $6,000. Gerald thought I had lost my mind. "Loretta," he said, and he had a particular way of saying my name when he thought I was about to do something irreversible. "We do not have $14,000. "I have 6, I said, "and I know a man at First Federal." Gerald looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "You already called the man at First Federal, didn't you?" I had. We closed on Sumter Street in March of 1979. I painted it myself over spring break. Gerald fixed the plumbing. We had our first tenant by May, a young nurse named Patricia, who paid her rent on the 1st of every month for 6 years without a single late payment. Patricia, if you're out there, you helped build something that your landlady never forgot. From Sumter Street came the second property. From the second came the third. Each one bought carefully, managed meticulously, never leveraged beyond what the numbers could honestly support. By the time Gerald passed, 15 years ago, we had 7 properties and no debt. My children inherited comfortable lives built on that foundation. What they apparently decided somewhere along the way was that the foundation itself should belong to them. I understood this. I had watched it developing for years. I had simply been deciding what to do about it. It didn't start with the meeting. It started with Douglas. Douglas Shaw married Renee in 2001. He was a real estate attorney, which I considered a reasonable profession and a useful skill set right up until I noticed how he looked at my properties. There is a particular kind of attention a man gives to something he has decided should eventually be his. It is not rude, it is not obvious, it is patient in the way that only greed can be patient. I noticed it at Christmas dinner 2016. Douglas asked me, very casually passing the sweet potatoes, whether I had updated my estate plan recently. Just something to consider, he said. Things get complicated without proper planning. I said I had an attorney who handled those things. He nodded, let it rest. I noted the date in my mind. 3 months later, Phillip called with a similar question, framed differently. He'd been reading about estate taxes, he said. The threshold changes were coming. Had I talked to anyone? I noted that, too. What followed over the next 4 years was a slow, patient, well-coordinated series of conversations that were each individually reasonable and collectively a blueprint. Add Phillip to the deed, just for simplicity. Consider a family LLC for tax efficiency. Think about restructuring the commercial property. Douglas knew someone. Let Phillip manage the rental income while I rested. I'd earned it. Each suggestion arrived wrapped in love and concern. Each one would have, if accepted, moved a piece of my estate from my sole control into a structure where my children had access. I declined each one pleasantly, and I began to compile. Not a journal, I didn't need one. I have a mind that has been keeping accounts since 1979 and has never once lost a number. But I wrote things down, dates, exact words, my own observations, and I made an appointment with Cecile Fontaine, not to act yet, just to think, just to put things in order the way I had always put things in order, carefully, methodically, before anyone else had decided the timeline. Gerald used to say I was the most patient woman he had ever known. He meant it as admiration. Phillip and Douglas were about to understand exactly what he meant. The memory care suggestion came in the fall of 2022. Not from Phillip directly, from Renee, which told me it had been discussed and assigned. Renee was always the messenger when the message was too uncomfortable for Phillip to deliver himself. We were having coffee. Renee was talking about a friend whose mother had recently moved into a facility in Mount Pleasant. Beautiful place, she said. The peace of mind, the community, the care. Then, almost as an aside, almost as if the thought had just occurred to her, "Mama, have you ever thought about what your plan is, just so we know?" I looked at my daughter across the coffee cup. I said, "I have a plan, baby. I've always had a plan." She smiled, moved on, didn't push. But I saw Douglas's fingerprints all over that conversation, the way I could always see a property's foundation issues before the inspector confirmed them. They were laying groundwork, not for my care, for the question of my competency. I know how this works. I spent 45 years in real estate. I have watched families come apart over estates more times than I can count. I have seen what happens when an elderly person's competency is questioned, how quickly the legal and financial landscape shifts, how many decisions can be made while the question is still open. They weren't ready to file anything yet. They were warming the room first. I drove to Cecile Fontaine's office the following Monday morning. Cecile has been my attorney for 22 years. She is 63 years old and has the particular quality of a woman who has seen every variety of human behavior and is surprised by none of it. I sat across from her desk. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I have always valued most about Cecile. Then she said, "How long do you want to wait before we move?" I said, "We're not waiting. I've been waiting for 6 years. I want to move now." She nodded. She opened a new file. Irrevocable trust, she said. We'll build it properly. Untouchable. Untouchable, I agreed. And the beneficiaries? I had already written the list. I slid it across her desk. She read it. She looked up at me with something in her eyes that I can only describe as satisfaction. Loretta, she said, it's going to be my pleasure.
Let me tell you what Cecile built. An irrevocable trust. For those who aren't familiar, irrevocable means exactly what it sounds like. Once established, it cannot be changed, challenged, or dissolved by anyone except the trustee. Not by family members, not by attorneys representing family members, not by well-meaning estate specialists Phillip had consulted without telling me. Not by anyone. The trust contained the following: 11 rental properties, including Sumter Street, which I have never sold and never will, the commercial building on King Street, which generates more monthly income than Phillip has earned in any single year of his professional life, the investment portfolio Gerald started in 1987 and I grew for 35 years, and the family home, the house on Rutledge Avenue where I raised my children, where Gerald died in the bedroom we shared for 41 years, where the magnolia tree in the backyard has been blooming every April since before either of my children were born. Cecile structured the trust with 3 beneficiaries. First, the Beaumont Family Scholarship Fund, established in Gerald's name at South Carolina State University, his alma mater. Full 4-year scholarships for students from low-income Charleston families pursuing degrees in business or education, funded in perpetuity from the trust's income. Second, 2 Charleston organizations I have supported for decades, one providing housing assistance to elderly residents being displaced by gentrification, one funding after-school programs in the neighborhoods where I bought my first properties. Third, Maya, my granddaughter, 27 years old, pre-law at USC, the child who came to see me on ordinary Tuesdays with no agenda except to sit in my kitchen and talk. Maya received the family home and a designated portion of the trust's income. The remaining beneficiaries, Phillip and Renee, received what Cecile described in the legal documentation as the statutory minimum required distribution. It was not nothing. It was also not what they had been planning for. Cecile filed the trust documents in January of 2023, 18 months before the family meeting. By the time Phillip opened his folder at my dining room table, the folder with the charts and the estate specialist's recommendations, every single thing he was describing had already been handled by me, at my own pace, on my own terms, as it had always been.
I need to tell you about Maya. Because without Maya, not the trust, not the scholarship, not any of it makes the same kind of sense. Maya Beaumont is the daughter of Philip's younger brother, Jerome, who died of a heart attack at 43 years old. Jerome was the quiet one, the one who never asked for anything, who worked hard and loved his family, and left us too soon. Maya has his eyes, and she has something that neither Phillip nor Renee was ever particularly interested in developing: genuine curiosity about other people, the kind that asks questions and actually listens to the answers, the kind that sits across from a 78-year-old woman and wants to know how she built 11 properties from one, what the market looked like in 1979, what she was afraid of and what she wasn't. Maya started visiting on Tuesdays 3 years ago. At first, I thought she was being dutiful, family obligation, the good grandmother checking on the grandmother. By the 3rd Tuesday, I knew better. She brought a notebook. She was taking notes, not because I asked her to, because she wanted to understand how something was built, really built, from nothing, over a lifetime, and she had decided I was the person who could teach her. I have loved many people in my life. The particular love I have for Maya is the love of recognition, of seeing your own best qualities in someone younger and knowing, with the clean certainty of someone who has evaluated assets for 45 years, that this one is worth everything you can give her. I told Maya about the trust 6 months after Cecile filed it. We were sitting at my kitchen table on a Tuesday. I slid the trust summary across to her. She read it quietly, all of it. When she looked up, her eyes were bright. "Grandma," she said, "how long have you been planning this?" "Long enough," I said. She looked back at the document. "The family home," she said softly. "Someone should live in it who loves it. The magnolia blooms every April. I want someone there who will notice." Maya reached across the table. She took my hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to.
Now, let me take you back to that dining room table. Same scene, but this time, you know what I know. Phillip talked for 40 minutes. Charts, projections, the estate specialist's recommendations. He proposed adding himself and Douglas as co-trustees of a new family trust that would consolidate the properties under shared management. For efficiency, he said, for continuity. What he was describing, I want you to understand this clearly, was a structure that would have given Douglas Shaw, a real estate attorney, co-trusteeship over 11 properties and a commercial building worth considerably more than any of them had been told. I sat at my dining room table, and I listened, and I thought about Cecile's office, about the trust documents filed 18 months ago, about the combination lock on the filing cabinet where my copies were stored, the same cabinet Gerald bought me in 1988 when I told him I needed somewhere to keep things that were only mine. I thought about Sumter Street in 1979, about Patricia, the nurse who paid on the 1st of every month, about 45 years of decisions made carefully, numbers run twice, risks taken only when the foundation was solid. And I thought about Douglas at Christmas dinner in 2016, asking about my estate plan while passing the sweet potatoes. 7 years he had been patient. I'll give him that. When Phillip finished, he looked at me with the particular expression of a man who believes he has been generous, who has offered a path that benefits everyone, if you accept the premise that his benefit and my benefit are the same thing. "Mama," he said, "what do you think?" I folded my hands. I smiled. I said, "That's a lot to think about. Let me sit with it." What I did not say, "I have been sitting with it for 6 years, Phillip. I sat with it in Cecile's office. I sat with it when the trust was filed. I sat with it when Maya read the documents at my kitchen table. I am sitting with it right now, at this table in this house, which is already spoken for in ways your estate specialist cannot touch." I said none of this. I smiled. I drove myself home, and I called Cecile. "It's time," I said.
I want to be honest with you about something. There is a version of this story that is only about winning, about the trust documents, about Douglas's face when Cecile presented them, about Phillip trying to find language for what had happened and not being able to locate any that didn't implicate him completely. That version is satisfying. It is also incomplete. The complete version includes the night I sat in my bedroom, the bedroom where Gerald died, where I have slept alone for 15 years, and I held the trust documents in my hands, and I thought about my children. Phillip, at 5 years old, sitting on the front steps of the Sumter Street house while I painted the shutters, handing me brushes and asking why we had to work so much. I told him, because work is how you build something that lasts. He nodded seriously the way 5-year-olds do when they're storing information they don't yet understand. Somewhere between that front step and the family meeting, he decided that what I had built should simply become his, without the work, without the arithmetic, without the 45 years of decisions made twice,
once in hope and once in numbers. I don't know exactly when that happened. I have thought about it many times. I think, and this is my honest belief as a woman who has loved Philip since before he was born, I think he never fully understood that what I built was built, that it didn't simply exist, that behind every property, every lease, every carefully managed tenant relationship, there were years of decisions that could have gone the other way. He saw the harvest, he never saw the planting, and that is partly my failing. Perhaps I should have shown him more of the work. Perhaps if he had handed me brushes on more front steps, he would have understood what it meant. I sat in Gerald's room, and I let myself feel that. Not the victory, the loss, the particular loss of a mother who built everything she could and could not, in the end, build the thing that mattered most: character. Then I put the documents back in the cabinet, and I went to sleep. And in the morning, I called Maya.
Cecile called the follow-up meeting. 2 weeks after the family dinner. Loretta's dining room table again, but this time Cecile was present, and the folder on the table was hers. Philip arrived with his estate specialist on the phone. Douglas arrived with a leather portfolio and the confidence of a man who has prepared for a negotiation. Renee arrived looking at her phone. Cecile presented the trust documents. She is not a dramatic woman, Cecile. She does not pause for effect or arrange her materials for impact. She simply placed the documents on the table and explained what they contained in the same precise, unadorned language she has used for 22 years. The irrevocable trust, filed 18 months ago. All 11 properties, the commercial building, the investment portfolio, the family home. Transferred. Complete. Philip's estate specialist went quiet on the phone. Douglas opened his leather portfolio, closed it, opened it again. Renee looked up from her phone for the first time. Philip looked at me. I looked back at him. "Mama," he said, "when did you—" "A while ago," I said. "You could have told us." I considered this. "You could have asked me how I was feeling, whether I needed anything. In the 6 years you were discussing my estate, those conversations happened rarely, Philip. The ones about my health and my happiness and whether I was lonely or afraid or needed company." He didn't have an answer for that. Renee was crying quietly. Douglas was reviewing the trust language with the focused attention of a man looking for an exit that isn't there. Cecile, to her credit, gave them time. Then she summarized the distributions. The scholarship fund, the 2 organizations, Maya. The statutory minimum for Philip and Renee. Philip stood up. He stood there for a moment. Then he said, quietly, without the performance of the family meeting, without the charts and the estate specialist, "Was it always going to be this way?" I thought about Sumter Street, about Patricia, the nurse, about the brushes on the front step. "No," I said honestly, "it wasn't always going to be this way." I let that sit. "But it became this way," I said, "gradually. And I paid attention."
That was 8 months ago. A great deal has settled since. Philip and I speak. Not often, the warmth is slow to return, and I am not going to pretend otherwise, but we speak. About family, about the grandchildren, about Gerald sometimes, because whatever else is true about Philip, he loved his father, and his grief for him is real. That matters to me. Renee and I had a longer conversation, alone, 2 months after the meeting. She told me she had known it wasn't right, that she had told Douglas as much. I believe her. I also believe she said yes anyway. We are working on it. Douglas and I have nothing to say to each other. I wish him no harm. I simply have no more to offer him. The Harvest Fund made its first awards in the spring. 12 students, 12 families in this city who look like mine, who started where I started, who were told what I was told in 1979, that the risk was too great, the moment was wrong, the resources weren't there. I was at the ceremony. I wore the navy dress, Gerald's earrings. Maya sat beside me. She starts law schools in the fall. She is going to be extraordinary. The magnolia bloomed in April. I called Maya the morning it opened. I knew she wouldn't be there yet. The house won't be hers until I'm done with it. And I described it to her over the phone. She listened like she always listens, like every word is worth keeping. I am 79 years old. I wake up in Gerald's house every morning, and the first thing I see from the bedroom window is that magnolia. And I think about what was planted, and what grew from it, and what it took, all those years of arithmetic and patience and watching and deciding again to arrive here. There is a proverb I have carried for a long time. For the unlearned, old age is winter. For the learned, it is the season of the harvest. I have been learning since 1979. Every property, every tenant, every Tuesday with Maya, every Christmas dinner where Douglas passed the sweet potatoes and revealed himself one careful question at a time. All of it was school. All of it was preparation. And I want you to hear this, wherever you are watching from, whatever season you are in. It is not too late to plant, and it is never too early to start paying attention. Now, I need to hear from you. What part of Loretta's story hit you deepest? The first property? The trust? The meeting? The first time or the second? Drop it in the comments. This is a community, and every voice in it matters. Share this with someone who is building something, someone who is being underestimated, someone who needs to know that the harvest is coming, if they do the work and hold their nerve. Subscribe if you belong here. Like this video if Loretta gave you something to carry. I'm Loretta Beaumont, 79 years old, built from scratch, still building, and not even close to done.